Money can buy governments. It can buy silence. It can buy life, usually. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, Sebastian Sterling, the man who owned half of the pharmaceutical industry, found out that $40 billion couldn't buy a single breath for his newborn son. 18 of the world's most elite specialists stood around a crib, helpless, watching an heir to an empire turn blue. They had the PhDs, they had the technology, but they didn't have the answer. The person who did wasn't wearing a white coat. She was wearing a grease-stained apron, holding a pot of coffee, and she was about to break every law in the book to do the unthinkable. This is the story of how a waitress saw what 18 geniuses missed. The champagne in the flutes cost more than Almira's rent for the entire year. That was the first thought that crossed her mind as she balanced the silver tray through the throngs of tuxedo-clad men and women dripping in diamonds. The obsidian ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton in New York City was suffocating. Not physically, the climate control was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but socially. The air was thick with the scent of old money, expensive perfume, and desperate ambition. Almira Rossi tightened her grip on the tray. She was invisible here. To these people, she wasn't a 24-year-old woman who had been top of her class in pre-med before the accident that ruined her family. She was just a pair of hands, serving canapes. "Watch it!" a woman in a red Vera Wang gown snapped, bumping into Almira and spilling a drop of wine. She didn't apologize. She just glared at Almira's name tag. "Sorry, ma'am," Almira murmured, lowering her eyes. "Disgraceful," the woman muttered, turning back to a conversation. "Anyway, as I was saying, have you seen Sebastian? He looks like a ghost." The mention of the name sent a ripple through the room. Sebastian Sterling, CEO of Sterling Heart Pharma, the Prince of Pills. He was the reason everyone was here tonight. The gala was a fundraiser for pediatric rare diseases, a cruel irony that everyone whispered about behind their hands. Almira moved toward the edge of the room, near the VIP cordon, trying to blend into the velvet curtains. She saw him then. Sebastian Sterling stood near the podium, looking nothing like the titan on the cover of Forbes. He was 32, but looked 50. His tuxedo hung loosely on his frame. His eyes were rimmed with dark, bruised circles, and his hands were shaking slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks. Beside him, in a high-tech, climate-controlled bassinet that looked more like a spaceship than a crib, was the reason for his torment. Leo Sterling, 3 months old. The baby was the billion-dollar baby, and he was dying. Almira felt a pang in her chest. She shouldn't stare. Staff were strictly forbidden from looking directly at the VIPs, especially the baby. But her old instincts, the ones buried under 3 years of grief and double shifts at the diner, flared up. She squinted. Even from 20 feet away, the baby didn't look right. It wasn't just that he was pale. He was grey. "He shouldn't be here," Almira whispered to herself. "Talking to yourself, Rossi?" Almira jumped. It was Marcus, the floor manager, a man who derived sick pleasure from firing staff for minor infractions. "Get those empty glasses to the kitchen. Now." "Yes, Marcus. Sorry." Almira turned to leave, but a commotion near the stage stopped her. The hum of conversation died instantly. A glass shattered. "He's not breathing! Somebody help!" The scream came from the nanny, a stout woman, standing over the bassinet. Sebastian Sterling moved with the speed of a desperate animal. He shoved a senator aside and ripped the sheer cover off the bassinet. The room went silent, save for the terrified gasps of the socialites. "Get the team! Now!" Sebastian roared, his voice cracking. Immediately the gala transformed into an emergency room. This was the unique tragedy of Sebastian Sterling. He never traveled without a medical entourage. 6 doctors, all employed exclusively by him, rushed from the wings. Among them was Dr. Alastair Thorne, the chief of pediatric neurology at Mount Sinai, a man whose consultation fee was $5,000 an hour. Almira stood frozen. She should have run to the kitchen. She should have stayed invisible, but her feet were rooted to the plush carpet. She watched Dr. Thorne pull a stethoscope from his tuxedo pocket, his face a mask of professional panic. "Oxygen!" Thorne barked. "Saturation is dropping. He's at 60%. Bag him!" A portable medical kit was ripped open. The wealthy onlookers pressed in, morbid curiosity warring with genuine horror. "Clear the area!" Sebastian screamed, his usual icy demeanor shattered. He was holding his son's tiny hand, his knuckles white. "Do something, damn it! Don't just check the monitors." "Sir, his airway is clear," another doctor, a cardiologist named Dr. Evans, said rapidly, "but his heart rate is plummeting. Bradycardia, 40 beats per minute." "Why?" Sebastian demanded. "Why is this happening?" "We don't know," Thorne admitted, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's the same as the last episode, but faster. Much faster. Prepare epinephrine. We might need to intubate right here." Almira found herself stepping forward. She was 10 feet away. Then 8. She watched the baby's movements. The doctors were focused on the machines, on the numbers flashing on the portable monitors. They were looking at the data. They weren't looking at the child. Leo wasn't just limp. He was rigid. His tiny back was arched, his hands clawed. Opisthotonos, Almira's brain supplied the term instantly. Severe muscle spasm, usually neurological. But it was the smell that hit her as she got closer. It was faint, masked by the heavy perfumes of the crowd and the scent of fear. But it was there, a sweet, cloying scent coming from the bassinet, like roasted almonds. "It's a seizure," Dr. Thorne announced, "administering midazolam." "No," Almira said. It was barely a whisper, but in the terrified silence of the room, it carried. Marcus, the manager, grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "What do you think you're doing? Get back." "That's not a seizure," Almira said, louder this time. She tried to pull away from Marcus. "Don't give him the midazolam. You'll stop his heart completely." Dr. Thorne looked up, his eyes narrowing behind his rimless glasses. He saw a waitress in a cheap polyester uniform daring to speak. "Security," he snapped. "Get this woman out of here." "Wait!" Almira shouted, fighting Marcus's grip. "Look at his skin! Look at the rash behind his ear! It's not neurological, it's toxic." Sebastian Sterling looked up. For a split second, his blue eyes locked with Almira's brown ones. In his eyes, she saw a bottomless pit of despair. In hers, he must have seen something else. Ferocity. "Remove her," Sebastian commanded, turning back to his dying son. "Thorne, save him." 2 burly security guards grabbed Almira. They dragged her backward, her heels skidding on the marble floor. "He's reacting to the flowers," Almira screamed, desperate now, watching the nurse prepare the needle that would likely kill the boy. "The centerpiece, the monk's hood. He's in anaphylactic shock combined with neurotoxicity. He needs atropine, not a sedative." "Get her out," Marcus hissed, shoving her toward the service doors. The heavy double doors swung shut, cutting off the scene. Almira was thrown into the bustling, noisy kitchen, the sound of the chaos in the ballroom muffled instantly. "You are fired, Rossi," Marcus spat, pointing a shaking finger at her face. "Get your things and get out. You'll never work in this city again." Almira stood there, her chest heaving. She knew she was right. She didn't know how she knew. It was a combination of the obscure toxicology textbook she had obsessed over during her mother's illness, and the specific, sweet smell of the wolfsbane, monk's hood, that had been used in the floral arrangements. But she knew. And she knew that in about 3 minutes, the $1 billion baby would be dead. She looked at the service exit leading to the alleyway. She could leave. She could walk away, go back to her small apartment in Queens and watch the tragic news on TV tomorrow. It wasn't her world, it wasn't her problem. But then she remembered the look in Sebastian Sterling's eyes. It wasn't the look of a billionaire. It was the look of a father watching his world end. Almira looked at the prep table next to her. There, sitting in the VIP special request bin, was a tray of EpiPens and emergency medical supplies that the hotel kept on standby for high-profile guests, though rarely used. Next to it was a crash cart intended for the kitchen staff emergencies. She grabbed a vial of atropine from the crash cart and a syringe. "Hey, what are you doing?" a sous chef shouted. Almira didn't answer. She turned back toward the swinging doors. "Rossi, if you go back out there, they will arrest you," Marcus screamed. "Let them," Almira said. She kicked the doors open. Inside the ballroom, the silence had turned into a cacophony of beeping alarms. "Flatline," Dr. Evans shouted. "He's gone into cardiac arrest, starting compressions." Sebastian Sterling let out a sound that wasn't human, a guttural roar of pure agony. He fell to his knees, clutching the side of the bassinet. The 18 doctors, some on the phone with specialists in Switzerland, others performing CPR, others checking charts, were failing. They were watching the monitor, watching the flat line. Almira didn't run to the monitor. She ran to the baby. Security moved to intercept her, but Sebastian, seeing the blur of movement, froze. Perhaps he was too broken to stop her. Perhaps he wanted a miracle. Almira slid onto her knees beside the bassinet, ducking under Dr. Thorne's arm. "Get away from him, you lunatic!" Thorne yelled, trying to shove her. Almira jammed her elbow into Thorne's ribs, a move she'd learned waiting tables in dive bars, knocking the chief of neurology backward. "You're treating the wrong thing!" she screamed. Before anyone could stop her, before the security guards could tackle her, she uncapped the syringe. She didn't hesitate. She found the muscle in the tiny thigh, the exact spot she had practiced on oranges 1,000 times in med school, and plunged the needle in. "She stabbed him!" someone shrieked. "Arrest her!" Security tackled Almira, slamming her face into the carpet. The syringe flew from her hand. A heavy knee pressed into her back, knocking the wind out of her. Handcuffs clicked tight around her wrists. "Get her off! Get her out!" Sebastian was screaming now, standing over her, his face twisted in rage. "You killed him! You crazy bitch! You killed him!" "Look at the monitor!" Almira wheezed, her face pressed against the floor, tasting dust and fear. "Just look." Dr. Evans paused in his compressions. Beep. The room froze. Beep, beep. The flat green line on the monitor spiked. Once, twice. "Sinus rhythm," Evans whispered, his voice trembling. "Heart rate returning. 60, 70. The grey pallor of the baby's skin began to flush with a faint, pink hue. The rigid arch of his back relaxed. Leo Sterling took a ragged, gasping breath. The sweetest sound in the world. The security guard on Almira's back didn't move. The handcuffs didn't loosen. Sebastian Sterling stared at the monitor, then at his son, who was now crying softly. He looked down at the waitress pinned to the floor, her uniform torn, her hair a mess. "Who are you?" he whispered. Almira couldn't answer. The crushing weight on her lungs made everything go black. 10th Precinct, 3:15 a.m. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Almira Rossi sat on a metal chair, her wrists still handcuffed to the table. Her waitressing uniform was torn at the shoulder, a physical reminder of the tackle that had taken her down. Her head throbbed, a dull rhythm syncing with the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. She wasn't scared. She was numb. In the last 3 hours, she had been read her rights, fingerprinted, and processed like a common criminal. The charge? Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon upon a medical professional. The door buzzed and swung open. 2 men walked in. The first was Detective Miller, a tired-looking man with a loosened tie. The second was a man Elmira expected to see, and dreaded. It was Dr. Alistair Thorne. He had changed out of his tuxedo into a pristine grey suit, looking every bit the untouchable medical god he believed he was. There was a bandage on his ribs where Elmira had elbowed him. "You're in a lot of trouble, Miss Rossi," Detective Miller said, dropping a thick file onto the table. "Dr. Thorne here is pressing full charges: assault, practicing medicine without a license, endangerment of a minor." "I saved his life," Elmira said, her voice raspy. She looked straight at Thorne. "And you know it," Thorne scoffed, a dry, ugly sound. "You got lucky, you hysterical little girl. The child was having a grand mal seizure. Administering atropine, a heart stimulant, could have caused a fatal arrhythmia. You essentially played Russian roulette with Sebastian Sterling's son. It's a miracle he didn't die instantly." "He had bradycardia," Elmira shot back, her medical training overriding her exhaustion. "His heart rate was 40, opisthotonos, arching, no foaming. And the rash behind the ear, purple, pinpoint, that's characteristic of aconitine poisoning. Wolfsbane." "Wolfsbane?" Thorne laughed, shaking his head at the detective. "Listen to her. She thinks we're in a fantasy novel. She's delusional, Miller. Lock her up before she hurts someone else." "The flowers on the table," Elmira insisted, leaning forward as far as the cuffs would allow. "The centerpieces. Blue monk's hood. Aconitum napellus. It's highly toxic if touched or ingested. The baby must have touched a petal that fell into the bassinet, then put his fingers in his mouth. That's all it takes." "Enough." Thorne slammed his hand on the table. "I am the chief of neurology at Mount Sinai. You serve appetizers. I will not be lectured on toxicology by a—" The door opened again. This time there was no buzz. The door was simply held open by a uniformed officer. Sebastian Sterling walked in. The room seemed to shrink. Sebastian was still wearing his tuxedo trousers and dress shirt, though the tie was gone and the collar was unbuttoned. He looked like a man who had walked through hell and was currently deciding whether to burn down the rest of the world. "Mr. Sterling," Detective Miller stammered, standing up. "Sir, you shouldn't be back here. We're handling the assailant." "Sit down," Sebastian said. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly calm. He didn't look at the detective. He didn't look at Thorne. He pulled a chair out and sat directly across from Elmira. He stared at her for a long 10 seconds. His blue eyes were bloodshot. "My lawyers are outside," Sebastian said. "They are preparing a lawsuit that will bury you, Miss Rossi. They will take your future earnings, your freedom, and your name. You will die in prison." Elmira swallowed hard. "I understand." "Do you?" Sebastian leaned in. "Dr. Thorne tells me you attacked him and injected my son with a dangerous stimulant based on a hunch about flowers." "It wasn't a hunch," Elmira whispered. "Leo is stable," Sebastian continued, his voice wavering slightly. "He is in the ICU. But Thorne says the recovery is due to the natural cessation of the seizure, and that your injection only complicated matters." "He's lying to protect his reputation," Elmira said, her eyes locking with Sebastian's. "Mr. Sterling, ask for the toxicology screen, a specific panel for alkaloids." "We did," Sebastian said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Dr. Thorne straightened up, looking smug. "Sebastian, please. We don't need to indulge her fantasies. The panel was just a formality to prove—" "Shut up, Alistair," Sebastian said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command struck Thorne like a whip. Sebastian unfolded the paper, He placed it on the table between them. "This came from the lab 10 minutes ago," Sebastian said. Elmira looked down. It was a complex printout of blood gas levels and toxicity markers. There, highlighted in a jagged red line, was the presence of a specific toxin. The room went silent. The hum of the light seemed to scream. Dr. Thorne's face drained of color. He snatched the paper. This is impossible. A false positive. The machine must be calibrated incorrectly." "I had them run it 3 times, Sebastian said coldly. He turned his gaze slowly to the famous doctor. "You were treating him for epilepsy. You were about to inject him with midazolam. If you had done that, with his heart rate already suppressed by the poison, he would have died," Elmira finished softly. Sebastian looked back at her. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by a profound, confusing intensity. "You were right. The waitress was right. And the 18 specialists were wrong?" "Mr. Sterling," Thorne stammered, sweat breaking out on his upper lip. "It's an honest diagnostic error. The symptoms are nearly identical. How could we have known about the flowers? It's an obscure—" "She knew," Sebastian pointed at Elmira. "She knew from 20 feet away while holding a tray of champagne. Why didn't you?" Thorne had no answer. Sebastian stood up. He looked at Detective Miller. "Unlock her." "Sir, she's still assaulted. Unlock her," Sebastian repeated, "or I will buy this precinct and fire every single one of you by sunrise." The detective fumbled for his keys. The cuffs clicked open. Elmira rubbed her wrists, wincing as the blood rushed back. "Dr. Thorne," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than ice. "You are fired. You are barred from Sterling Heart Properties. If I hear you are practicing medicine anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, I will spend every penny I have to destroy you. Get out of my sight." Thorne fled the room without a word. Elmira stood up, her legs shaky. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I should go." "No," Sebastian said. He blocked her path to the door. "You're not going anywhere." Elmira tensed. "You said I was free." "You are free from the police," Sebastian said. "But you're not free from me. My son is alive because of you. But he was poisoned at my own gala. Someone put those flowers there. Someone wanted him dead." He took a step closer, towering over her. "I have 18 doctors on my payroll, and I don't trust a single one of them anymore. The only person who saw the truth is you." "What do you want?" Elmira asked. "I want you to come with me," Sebastian said. "I'm taking Leo home to the estate. I'm setting up a private ICU there. I want you to watch him." "I'm not a doctor," Elmira said. "I never finished my residency. I'm a waitress." "I don't care what your title is," Sebastian said. "I'll pay you $10,000 a week. You will be his medical guardian. You watch the doctors. You watch the nurses. You watch everything." "And if I say no?" Sebastian looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the vulnerability beneath the power. He was terrified. "Please," he said. "Don't make me beg." The Sterling estate in the Hamptons wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. The helicopter ride from the city had taken 30 minutes, during which neither Sebastian nor Elmira spoke. Elmira stared out at the dark ocean, her mind racing. $10,000 a week. It was enough to pay off her mother's medical debts in 2 months. It was enough to restart her life. But the way Sebastian looked at her, like she was a talisman, a lucky charm he was afraid to lose, unsettled her. They landed on a private pad illuminated by blue floodlights. A team of staff was waiting, but Sebastian waved them off. He carried the baby carrier himself. Leo had been discharged against hospital advice, but with the amount of equipment Sebastian had flown in, the nursery was better equipped than most ERs. Almira followed him through the massive mahogany doors, her sneakers squeaking on the marble floors. The house was beautiful, filled with art that belonged in museums, but it felt cold, empty. "The nursery is this way," Sebastian said, marching up the grand staircase. They entered a wing that had been converted into a high-tech medical bay. Monitors beeped softly. A sterile scent replaced the smell of ocean air. Two nurses stood at attention, looking nervous as Sebastian entered. "This is Almira," Sebastian announced, setting the carrier down gently. "She is in charge. If she tells you to do something, you do it. If she tells you to leave, you leave. Is that clear?" The nurses exchanged confused glances. Almira was still wearing her stained waitress uniform, but they nodded. "Yes, Mr. Sterling." Sebastian turned to Almira. "He's yours to watch. I have to make calls. I have to find out who ordered those flowers." He left the room, leaving Almira alone with the heir to the Sterling Empire and two skeptical nurses. Almira approached the crib. Leo was sleeping. He looked peaceful now, the color back in his cheeks. The wires attached to his chest rose and fell rhythmically. She reached out and lightly touched his small hand. His fingers curled around her thumb instinctively. A wave of protectiveness washed over her. It wasn't just the money. She had saved him. In a way, he was hers now too. "You need a change of clothes," one of the nurses, a woman named Sarah, said kindly, breaking the tension. Mr. Sterling had some things sent up to the guest suite next door. "Thank you," Almira said. She went to the adjoining room, which was larger than her entire apartment. On the bed lay a stack of clothes, simple, high-quality linens, scrubs, and a robe. She showered quickly, washing the smell of the police station and the gala off her skin. When she returned to the nursery, wearing fresh scrubs, the mood had shifted. The nurses were whispering. They stopped abruptly when she entered. "What is it?" Almira asked. "Dr. Evans is here," Sarah said, pointing to the hallway. "He's demanding to see the patient." Dr. Evans was the cardiologist from the gala. He wasn't as arrogant as Thorne, but he was part of the old guard. He stood in the doorway, looking agitated. "Mr. Sterling said no visitors," Almira said firmly. "I'm his cardiologist, for God's sake," Evans snapped it. "I need to check his heart rhythm after the atropine. You might have caused long-term stress on the valves." Almira hesitated. Evans had a point. She stepped aside. 5 minutes. I'll be watching the monitor." Evans walked in, pulling a stethoscope from his pocket. He leaned over the crib. Almira watched him like a hawk. She watched his hands. She watched his eyes. He listened to Leo's chest. "Rhythm is stable," he muttered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small penlight to check Leo's pupils. As he leaned down, his jacket fell open. Almira saw it. Tucked into the inner pocket of his suit jacket was a receipt. It was sticking out just an inch, but the logo was visible. Fleur de Lis Botanicals. Almira's heart stopped. Fleur de Lis Botanicals was a high-end florist in Chelsea, the kind that specialized in exotic imports. Why would a cardiologist have a receipt from a florist in his pocket right after a gala where the flowers nearly killed his patient? "Dr. Evans," Almira said, her voice tight. "Did you enjoy the gala before the incident?" Evans flinched. He stood up too quickly. "It was fine. Why?" "The flowers were beautiful," Almira said, bluffing. "I noticed you admiring them earlier. Did you know they were monkshood?" Evans turned to face her. His expression shifted. The professional concern vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You're a very observant girl, Almira. That can be dangerous." "What is that receipt in your pocket?" Almira asked, stepping closer to the panic button on the wall. Evans shoved his hand against his chest, covering the pocket. My wife's anniversary. Not that it's your business. Show me, Elmira challenged. You're overstepping, Evans growled. He took a step toward her. Suddenly, the baby monitor spiked. Beep, beep, beep. Leo started crying, a high-pitched wail of distress. Elmira spun around, the IV line. While Evans had been blocking her view with his body, his other hand had been near the IV port. "What did you do?" Elmira screamed. She shoved Evans aside and looked at the line. A small air bubble was moving down the tube, inches from the baby's vein. An air embolism. It could kill him instantly. Evans didn't stay to argue. He turned and bolted out of the room. "Security!" Elmira yelled, slamming her hand on the panic button. She grabbed the IV line and clamped it shut with her fingers, just millimeters before the air bubble entered the catheter. Her hands were shaking, but her grip was iron. The doors burst open. It wasn't security. It was Sebastian. He had a gun in his hand. "What happened?" he roared, seeing Elmira clamping the line and the empty room. "Evans!" Elmira gasped. "He tried to inject air into the line. He ran!" Sebastian's face went white. He tapped his earpiece. "Lock down! Seal all exits! Evans is the target! Shoot to disable, but do not let him leave the grounds!" He rushed to the crib, looking at his crying son, then at Elmira, who was still clamping the line for dear life. "I've got it," Sebastian said, his voice breaking. He clamped the line properly and disconnected it. He looked at Elmira. She was trembling now, the adrenaline crash hitting her. "He had a receipt," Elmira whispered. "From a florist. He knew Sebastian. It wasn't an accident. It was him." Sebastian reached out and grabbed Elmira by the shoulders. "You saved him again." "He's not safe here," Elmira said, tears welling up in her eyes. "If your own doctors are trying to kill him, who can you trust?" Sebastian pulled her into a hug. It was desperate and fierce. He buried his face in her hair. "No one," he whispered into her ear. "I can't trust anyone, except you." He pulled back, his eyes dark with a new plan. "We have to leave," Sebastian said. "What?" "You just got here. They know where we are. Evans will talk. If there's a conspiracy, there are others. We can't stay in the house." "Where can we go?" Sebastian looked at the window, at the storm brewing over the Atlantic. "I have a yacht, the Obsidian. It's docked 3 miles from here. It's self-sufficient. We go to international waters. Just you, me, and Leo." "That's kidnapping," Elmira said. "Or madness. I can't just run away with a billionaire." "You already have," Sebastian said. "Evans is loose. If you stay here, they'll kill you too, because you know too much. You're a witness, Elmira. You're in this now." Elmira looked at the baby. He had settled down, his eyes open, looking at her with that innocent, trusting gaze. She looked at Sebastian, a man stripped of his arrogance, left with nothing but a father's desperation. She thought of her empty apartment, her dead-end job, her lonely life. "Okay," Elmira said. "Let's go." As they packed the medical bag, neither of them noticed the small, blinking red light on the smoke detector in the corner of the ceiling. It wasn't a smoke detector. It was a camera. And miles away, in a dark office, Dr. Thorne was watching a screen. He wasn't alone. A woman in a red dress, the same one who had bumped into Elmira at the gala, was standing behind him, swirling a glass of wine. "She's a problem," the woman said, her voice like silk and razor blades. "She's a waitress," Thorne spat. "She's nothing." "She's with him," the woman corrected. "And they're running. Initiate the Coast Guard protocol. Tell them Sebastian Sterling has kidnapped a child and is mentally unstable. Make him the villain." Thorne smiled. "With pleasure." The rain had turned into a deluge, hammering the roof of the nondescript black SUV Sebastian had pulled from the estate's garage. He wasn't driving the Ferrari or the Rolls-Royce. He was driving the staff transport vehicle, an armored Chevy Suburban. Almira sat in the back seat, her body curled around Leo's car seat. She checked his pulse every 30 seconds. "How is he?" Sebastian asked, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "Sleeping," Almira said. "But his breathing is shallow. The stress is getting to him." "Sebastian, we can't just drive around forever. Where is the marina?" 10 minutes, Sebastian said. "But we have a problem." He pointed to the dashboard navigation screen. It was flashing red. "What is that?" "Police scanner," Sebastian said grimly. "They've issued an amber alert for Leo and a bolo, be on the lookout, for me. They're saying I'm armed and dangerous, suffering from a psychotic break following the stress of my son's illness, and they're saying I've taken a hostage." Almira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Me? I'm the hostage?" It's the perfect narrative. Sebastian gripped the wheel until his knuckles cracked. The grieving billionaire snaps, kidnaps the delusional waitress who assaulted a doctor, and runs off with the dying baby. If the cops see us, they won't ask questions. They'll shoot out the tires. Maybe they'll just shoot. "Who is doing this?" Almira asked. "Who has that kind of power?" "Isabella." Sebastian spat the name out like a curse. "Isabella Sterling, my stepmother." "The woman in the red dress?" Almira remembered the haughty voice from the gala. "She controls the board of Sterling Heart. If Leo dies, the family trust dissolves, and the company goes entirely to her. If I go to prison for kidnapping and manslaughter, she wins everything." Sebastian swerved suddenly, exiting the highway onto a dirt utility road. "Why are we turning?" Almira clutched the baby carrier. "Roadblock ahead," Sebastian said. "I saw the lights reflecting on the overpass. They're closing the net." The SUV bounced violently over the uneven ground. Mud splattered the reinforced windows. Almira looked down at Leo. The baby whimpered. "It's okay. Shh," she whispered, stroking his forehead. She felt heat. "Sebastian," she said, her voice rising in panic. "He's getting warm. He's spiking a fever." "The poison?" "No," Almira said, her mind racing through the differential diagnoses. "The poison is clearing. This is something else. It might be an infection from the IVs the hospital used, or, God, without a lab, I'm guessing." "Just keep him alive, Almira," Sebastian pleaded. "Just get us to the boat. The Obsidian has a full med bay. Better than the house." They crashed through a chain-link fence, the heavy SUV tearing the metal like paper. Ahead, the dark water of the harbour churned under the storm. The marina was deserted, save for the swaying masts of 100 yachts. "There," Sebastian pointed to a sleek black vessel at the end of the private pier. It looked military-grade, sharp and aggressive. He slammed the brakes. "Go! Take Leo! Run to the ramp! I'll cover you!" "Cover me with what?" Sebastian reached under his seat and pulled out a flare gun and a heavy flashlight. "Just go!" Almira unbuckled the carrier and scrambled out into the rain. The wind nearly knocked her over. She shielded Leo's face with her body and sprinted towards the pier. Blue lights erupted behind them. 3 police cruisers skidded onto the gravel, sirens wailing. "Police! Step out of the vehicle!" A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Almira froze halfway down the dock. "Keep running!" Sebastian roared. He threw the SUV into reverse and slammed the gas. The massive vehicle roared backward, smashing into the lead police cruiser, blocking the path. The impact was deafening. Sebastian jumped out of the driver's side, sprinting after Almira. "Stop him!" a cop shouted. A gunshot rang out. Almira screamed as a bullet chipped the wood of the dock inches from her foot. "Don't shoot!" Sebastian yelled, throwing his hands up as he ran, putting himself between the police and Almira. "There's a baby! Don't shoot!" They scrambled up the ramp of the Obsidian. Sebastian hit the release lever, and the automated gangway began to retract immediately. "Start the engines," Sebastian commanded, rushing to the bridge controls on the aft deck. "I don't know how to drive a yacht," Almira yelled, hugging Leo. "I do!" Sebastian punched a code into the console. The engines roared to life, a deep, thrumming vibration that shook the deck. "Get below. Get to the medical bay." As the yacht pulled away from the dock, peeling out into the harbour with shocking speed, Almira looked back. The police were lined up on the pier, weapons drawn, helpless against the power of the Obsidian. But standing behind the police line, holding a black umbrella, was a figure that made Almira's blood run cold. It was Dr. Thorne. He was on the phone. He wasn't looking at the police. He was looking right at the boat, and he was smiling. The storm had passed, leaving behind a rolling, nauseating swell. The Obsidian was on autopilot, cruising at 20 knots into the black void of the Atlantic. Down in the master cabin, which had been converted into a sterile isolation room, the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor. Leo was pale again. The fever was climbing. 103.5 degrees. Almira had stripped off her wet scrubs and was wearing one of Sebastian's oversized cashmere sweaters. She looked exhausted, her hair frizzed, dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't sat down since they boarded. Sebastian stood in the doorway. He had changed into dry clothes, but he still looked like a wreck. He held 2 mugs of coffee. "Drink," he said softly, setting one down on the metal tray table. "I can't," Almira said, her eyes fixed on the baby. "His white blood cell count is skyrocketing. I ran the portable hemo-Q. It's sepsis, Sebastian. It has to be." "From what?" Sebastian asked, moving to stand beside her. The proximity was electric, but terrifying. "The central line Dr. Evans put in," Almira said, her voice shaking with rage. "It wasn't just the air bubble. The insertion site is inflamed. It's red and hot. They didn't just try to poison him with flowers. They introduced bacteria directly into his bloodstream. It's a fail-safe. If the wolfsbane didn't work, the infection would kill him in 48 hours. Sebastian closed his eyes, a look of pure agony crossing his face. "My own staff. I paid them millions." "Money makes people greedy, not loyal," Almira said quietly. "And you?" Sebastian opened his eyes, looking at her. "I haven't paid you a dime yet. Why are you still here? You could have run into the woods back at the roadblock. You could have saved yourself." Almira looked at Leo, then up at Sebastian. 3 years ago, I was a semester away from my MD. I was going to be a pediatric surgeon, top of my class at Johns Hopkins. "What happened?" "A drunk driver," Almira said, her hand subconsciously touching a faint scar on her hairline. "T-boned my parents' car. They died instantly. I survived, but I spent 6 months in rehab learning to walk again. By the time I got out, the medical bills had taken everything. My tuition money, the house, the insurance, everything. I had to drop out. I had to work 3 jobs just to pay off the funeral costs." She looked down at her hands that were rough from scrubbing dishes, yet steady enough to save a life. "I swore I'd never step foot in a hospital again," she whispered. "The system failed my parents. The doctors were too busy worrying about insurance pre-authorizations to treat my father's internal bleeding in time. I hated them." She looked at Sebastian. "But when I saw Leo, I didn't see a billionaire's heir. I saw a patient, and I saw the same arrogance in Dr. Thorne that I saw the night my parents died. I couldn't let them win again." Sebastian reached out. His hand hovered for a moment before cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You are more of a doctor than any of them," Sebastian said fiercely. "You are a miracle, Almira." The moment hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Sebastian leaned in, just an inch. Almira's breath hitched. She could smell the sea salt and expensive scotch on him. Beep, 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 beep. The monitor alarm shattered the moment. "Heart rate is spiking!" Almira snapped into action, pulling away from Sebastian. 180. He's going into septic shock. "What do we do?" Sebastian asked, the vulnerability gone, replaced by action. "I need antibiotics," Almira said. "Broad spectrum, vancomycin and ceftriaxone. Do you have them?" Sebastian rushed to the imposing medical cabinet built into the wall. He scanned the rows of drugs. "I have everything. This boat is prepped for doomsday." He threw her the vials. Almira grabbed a syringe. "I need to establish a new IV line. The old one is the source of the infection. I have to pull it." "Can you do it?" Sebastian asked. "On a moving boat?" "I have to," Almira said. "Hold him down. Don't let him move." Sebastian placed his large hands on his son's tiny shoulders. Leo screamed as Almira ripped the tape of the infected line off. The sight was angry and oozing. "God!" Sebastian gagged. "Focus on me," Almira commanded. She found a tiny vein in the baby's other arm. The boat lurched over a wave. "Steady," Almira whispered. She advanced the needle, a flash of blood in the chamber. Success. "I'm in," she said, taping it down rapidly. She injected the antibiotics. "Now we wait. If the fever breaks in an hour, he lives. If not—" She didn't finish the sentence. They sat on the floor of the cabin, side by side, watching the numbers. 180. 178. 175. "It's working," Sebastian breathed out, leaning his head back against the wall. "It's coming down." He turned his head to look at her. "You did it." Almira let out a long sigh, the adrenaline leaving her body, leaving her trembling. He's a fighter. Like his dad. Sebastian took her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. He interlaced his fingers with hers. It felt natural. It felt like an anchor in a storm. "Almira," he said, "when this is over, I'm going to give you back your life. You're going to finish med school. You're going to run your own hospital. I promise you." "Let's just survive the night," Almira said softly. Suddenly, the boat shuddered violently. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into red emergency lighting. The engine hum cut out. "What was that?" Almira gasped, grabbing the crib to steady it. Sebastian stood up, his face hardening. "That wasn't a wave, that was a kill switch." "A kill switch." "Someone remotely cut the engines," Sebastian said. "Isabella, she has the override codes for the yacht." He ran to the porthole and looked out. Out in the darkness, a spotlight blinded him. A voice amplified by a megaphone cut through the wind. "This is the United States Coast Guard. Heave to and prepare to be boarded." Sebastian squinted against the light. He saw the silhouette of the ship. It wasn't the white and orange of the Coast Guard. It was dark grey. No markings, and the men standing on the deck weren't holding standard-issue sidearms. They were holding assault rifles. "That's not the Coast Guard," Sebastian said, reaching for the flare gun again. "Those are mercenaries. They're here to clean up the mess." "What do we do?" Almira asked, terrified. "They can't board if we're moving," Sebastian said, "but we're dead in the water." He looked at Almira. "Can you shoot?" "I'm a waitress from Queens," Almira said. "I've never held a gun in my life." "Well," Sebastian said, handing her the flare gun. "Tonight's a night for firsts. Aim for the fuel tank on their deck. I'm going to the engine room to override the lockout manually." "You're leaving me?" "Lock the door," Sebastian ordered. "If they get in, burn them." He kissed her forehead, a hard, desperate press of his lips, and ran out into the dark corridor. Almira stood alone in the red light, the flare gun heavy in her hand, the baby crying in the crib, and the sound of heavy boots thudding onto the deck above her head. The hunt was on. The heavy steel door of the medical bay shuddered. Someone was kicking it from the outside. "Open up! We know you're in there!" a rough voice shouted. Almira backed into the corner, putting the crib behind her. Her hands were shaking so badly the flare gun rattled. She looked at the Leo. He was sleeping through the chaos, the antibiotics finally winning the war in his blood. She had saved him twice. She wouldn't let men with guns take him now. Thud. The door hinges groaned. Thud. The metal began to buckle. Almira raised the flare gun. It was a single-shot mechanism. She had one chance. The door flew open with a crash. A man in tactical gear filled the frame. He wore a balaclava and held a suppressed rifle. "Target acquired," he said into his radio. "Female and child secured." He stepped forward, reaching for Almira. "Stay back!" Almira screamed. The mercenary laughed. "Put the toy away, sweetheart." He lunged. Almira didn't aim at him. She aimed at the ceiling, specifically at the fire suppression sprinkler head directly above him. Pop! Whoosh! The flare struck the sensor. The intense heat triggered the system instantly. But this wasn't water. The obsidian was equipped with a halon gas suppression system for electrical fires. A blast of freezing, oxygen-sucking gas erupted into the room. The mercenary gagged, blinded by the sudden fog and the chemical shock. He stumbled back, clawing at his mask. Almira took a breath of the clean air near the floor, grabbed the baby carrier, and bolted past him. She slammed her shoulder into his chest, knocking the disoriented man into the hallway, and sprinted for the stairs. Meanwhile, 3 decks down in the engine room, Sebastian was fighting for his life. 2 mercenaries had cornered him near the generator. Sebastian, fueled by a father's rage, was fighting like a man possessed. He swung a heavy wrench, connecting with the knee of the first attacker. The man went down with a sickening crunch. The second man raised his pistol. Sebastian didn't hesitate. He pulled the manual fuel release lever. Hot diesel sprayed across the floor, making it slick as ice. The mercenary slipped, his shot going wild, sparking off the steel hull. Sebastian tackled him. They rolled in the diesel, punches landing with wet thuds. Sebastian was younger, stronger, and infinitely more desperate. He grabbed the man's head and slammed it against the floor plates. The man went limp. Sebastian scrambled to the control panel. He ripped the cover off the manual override. "Come on!" He gritted his teeth, twisting the wires together. "Come on!" The engines roared to life. The lights flickered on. Sebastian grabbed the throttle and slammed it full forward. The obsidian lurched. The sudden acceleration threw everyone off balance. Up on the deck, Almira was sliding across the wet teak. She clutched the baby carrier, sliding toward the railing. "Almira!" Sebastian burst onto the deck. He saw her sliding toward the open ocean. He lunged, grabbing her wrist just as her feet went over the edge. He pulled her back, hauling her and Leo into his chest. They collapsed on the deck, gasping for air, as the yacht tore through the waves at 40 knots, leaving the mercenary ship far behind in the darkness. "You're okay," Sebastian panted, checking her for injuries. "You're okay." They tried to take him," Almira sobbed, the terror finally catching up to her. "They failed," Sebastian said, his eyes hard as flint. "And they made a mistake." He held up a radio he had taken from the mercenary in the engine room. "I heard their comms," Sebastian said. "They aren't just mercenaries. They're private security contractors employed by Shellcroft Holdings. That's a shell company my stepmother uses for dirty work. We have proof," Almira asked. "Better," Sebastian said. I recorded it. The command to terminate the father and secure the asset came through this radio. I have Isabella's voice on tape, ordering my murder." Almira looked at the horizon. A faint glow of dawn was appearing. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We can't go to the police. She owns them." Sebastian looked at the glowing skyline of New York City in the distance. "Today is the quarterly shareholder meeting," Sebastian said. "Isabella is going to announce my removal as CEO due to mental instability and take full control of the company. Every news outlet, every major investor, every camera in the world will be there." He looked at Almira. "We're going to crash the party." The boardroom was packed. 500 people, shareholders, journalists, and board members filled the auditorium. On stage, Isabella Sterling stood at the podium. She looked impeccable in a white Chanel suit, dabbing a fake tear from her eye with a silk handkerchief. "It is with a heavy heart," Isabella said, her voice trembling perfectly, "that I assume control of my late husband's legacy. Sebastian, poor Sebastian. The grief over his son's illness has broken his mind. He has kidnapped the child and vanished. We fear the worst." The crowd murmured sympathetically. "Dr. Thorne," Isabella gestured to the front row, "has confirmed that Sebastian was suffering from paranoid delusions." Thorne stood up, looking grave and authoritative. "Yes, it is a tragedy. We are working with the authorities to recover the body of the child. Therefore," Isabella continued, "I move to immediately strip Sebastian of all voting rights and transfer full executive power to myself." "Seconded," a board member said. "All in favor?" "Not so fast!" The heavy double doors at the back of the auditorium slammed open. The room gasped. Every head turned. Sebastian Sterling stood there. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing oil-stained cargo pants and a t-shirt. He looked dangerous. He looked alive. And beside him walked Almira Rossi. She was holding Leo. "He's alive!" someone shouted. Cameras began to flash in a blinding wave. "Security!" Isabella shrieked, her composure shattering. "Arrest him! He's dangerous!" 4 guards moved to intercept them. "Stop!" Almira stepped forward, holding a microphone Sebastian had handed her. Her voice rang out, clear and strong, echoing through the massive hall. "If you touch us, you kill the only witness who knows how Dr. Thorne tried to murder this baby." The guards hesitated. The word murder froze the room. Sebastian strode to the stage. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Isabella. "You wanted my company so badly you were willing to kill my son?" Sebastian asked, his voice amplified by the lapel mic he had snagged from a stunned sound technician. "He's lying!" Isabella screamed. "He's insane! Dr. Thorne, tell them!" "Dr. Thorne poisoned Leo with wolfsbane at the gala," Sebastian announced calmly. "Lies!" Thorne shouted, sweating. "Proof! Where is your proof?" Sebastian pulled a flash drive from his pocket and plugged it into the presentation laptop on the podium. The massive screen behind Isabella flickered. It wasn't a PowerPoint slide, it was a video file. The audio crackled through the speakers. The voice was unmistakable. It was Isabella. The crowd erupted. Journalists were shouting questions. Shareholders were standing up. Sebastian clicked the next file. It was the toxicology report Almira had saved. Aconitine detected. "And this," Sebastian pointed to Almira. "This is the woman who saved him. A waitress who knew more about medicine than your entire payroll of assassins." Almira walked up the stairs to the stage. She stood next to Sebastian. She looked out at the sea of faces. The same people who had ignored her at the gala, who had treated her like furniture. "Dr. Thorne," Almira said, looking directly at the man who had tried to ruin her. "You missed the rash. You missed the smell. You missed the diagnosis because you didn't care about the patient. You only cared about the paycheck. Thorne slumped into his chair, defeated. Police sirens wailed outside. Real police. The FBI, whom Sebastian had called from the boat once they were in range. Agents burst into the room. Isabella Sterling, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and corporate espionage. As the handcuffs clicked around Isabella's wrists, she looked at Sebastian with pure venom. You'll never run this company alone. You're weak. Sebastian put his arm around Elmira. I'm not alone. The diner in Queens was still there. But Elmira wasn't. She was walking across the stage at Columbia Medical School, accepting her re-enrollment acceptance letter. She wasn't just a student. She was a legend. The waitress who saved the billion-dollar baby was a headline that had gone around the world. She walked out into the sunshine, where a black sedan was waiting. Sebastian leaned against the car. He looked younger, lighter. The shadows were gone from his eyes. In the back seat, a healthy, happy 1-year-old Leo was clapping his hands. Ready for your first day? Sebastian asked, opening the door for her. I'm nervous, Elmira admitted. You faced down mercenaries, a corrupt board of directors, and my stepmother. Sebastian smiled, taking her hand and kissing her knuckles. Med school will be a breeze. Thank you, Elmira said softly, for keeping your promise. I have one more promise to keep, Sebastian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I promised myself I wouldn't let the woman who saved my life walk away. Elmira gasped. Dr. Rossi, Sebastian grinned. I think I need a permanent consultation. Elmira smiled, leaning in to kiss him. I think we can arrange that. And that is how a waitress with a sharp eye and a brave heart took down a corrupt empire and saved a life when 18 experts failed. It just goes to show that sometimes the most important qualification isn't a degree. It's caring enough to pay attention. If you enjoyed this story of twists, justice, and romance, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next real-life drama. Thanks for watching.